Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Flourish podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tony Engram, and you will hear straight from some of the top leaders in health and wellness on how to take control of your family's spiritual, mental, and physical health, because we are all designed to flourish. Now, as a reminder, this show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the Flourish podcast should be taken as medical advice. For your own specific medical advice, please always consult with your own healthcare providers. So with that being said, let's get started. I am so excited to talk to you guys today. So much so that I thought we needed to bring on a special guest and co-host, the lovely Erica Acuña, who is a hygienist and myofunctional therapist here with us at Flourish. So Erica, we're so glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Engram. I'm really happy to be here. I think this is great. And I think, I'm all about educating patients. I'm a hygienist at heart. So I think that's important to make people aware of some of these things.
Absolutely. So today, in honor of today's podcast, we have a very important topic. So I wore one of my favorite t-shirts for you guys. It is, if you're listening on one of your podcast apps, you won't be able to see it. So I'll just tell you if you're not watching on Rumble or YouTube. It is my I don't co-parent with the government t-shirt. So over the last 3 years, so many of you have come to realize that really the government has taken maybe too involved a role in our children's lives. And we would like to make sure that the government knows that we are in control of what our family does and doesn't do, what we learn and don't learn, the medications that we take and we don't take. So one of the areas where you may not realize that the government has been very involved in your family's life is in medication that is in our water supply. And that medication is fluoride. Fluoride has been in most municipal water supplies for many decades, since the 40s and 50s. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because there's some important news around that. And I want to make sure that my patients, my listeners are as involved and informed as possible, because this is important. This is what your family drinks every day, what we ingest every day, what we bathe in every day. And we want to make sure that we know what's going on. So let's start with Erica first. I would love for you to just tell us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us how you kind of came over to the biological side of dentistry.
Sure.
And then let's talk a little bit about the history of fluoride.
Okay. So I've been a dental hygienist. Actually, I've been in dentistry now for 15 years. Which is wild because, time flies when you're having fun, 10 of those years I have been a dental hygienist, and, I did dental hygiene school the kind of way everybody does dental hygiene school. You learn the standards, you learn the competencies, and you get out there and you do your best, I have one daughter, and I think when I became a mom, that was kind of my calling to, keep my child pure. It was like, I didn't want to do anything extra. Like, I just wanted her to be her. I wanted to not have to integrate so many things into her life if she was thriving and doing well. And like most moms, that sends you down so many rabbit holes. And as I kind of integrated mom life with my professional life, I realized there's things that I did professionally that I did not want to do to my daughter. And for a while, I kind of kept it secret. It was like, I did this at work, but I didn't want to do it to her. And you start finding your people that kind of do the same thing. And you're like, I knew there was something about that, And I think that's whenever I came to the said dark side. And after all these years, I realized like, I think it's actually the light side, which is really funny because in my operatory, it's generally darker and very ambient, and
That's
it's
true.
kind of
You do
cool.
keep it very dark in there.
I do. And patients love it, but they're like, oh, I'm coming to the dark side. And I'm like, yeah. So
Right?
it's fun, but over the years I've learned a lot of dentistry can be very toxic. And they have standards and different things that they teach you in dental school. So there's not really like a holistic, dental hygiene program that makes us to believe a lot of these things until we do our own research and start looking at literature that is actually out there and telling us maybe a little different side of the story, But that's kind of how I started. And then one rabbit hole led to another. And here I am telling patients all about it.
Awesome. Awesome. And our patients love you too.
Yeah,
We've got great patients, don't we?
we do. I really think we have the best patients out there. I really do.
We kind of do. It's
Yeah.
really not fair.
Yeah, I know.
It's not fair to everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the history of fluoride. So it was discovered in the early part of the 20th century. They found that the communities that had naturally higher levels of fluoride in the water tended to have stronger teeth that were less prone to cavities. So Erica, tell us a little bit about kind of how we went from that to adding it to the water.
Sure. There's been a lot of fluoride talk, like, I don't know, it could probably date back to the early 1900s, but right about the 1940s, that's when they kind of started to believe fluoride was much more of a nutrient. And a nutrient is something like a vitamin or a mineral, something that's necessary for good health. Thus, the people who didn't live in high fluoridated areas, they generally had more dental issues, things like that. So it was kind of the idea that if they didn't have or if they had a fluoride deficiency, that's where you had a problem, which was like dental cavities. Similar to like if you had a calcium deficiency, osteoporosis. If you had a vitamin D deficiency, you could get rickets, something like that. In reality, nowadays we know that that's not totally true. The CDC does say that adding fluoride to the water was kind of one of the top 10 biggest achievements in public health, and it started about the 1940s in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And slowly, as they integrated it in the water there, other sources kind of came about, whether it was like our cookware, fertilizers, and so many different things. Even dental products and dental hygiene products started including fluoride as well. Some of the deeper history of how water was fluoridated from the beginning dates back into like World War II, into the Cold War. It's kind of funny because there's a really good book that I used for my own personal come out of the dental hygiene standards and learn about fluoride. I think it's one of the big things that made me actually finally cut it out, because I was like, well, then I'm not doing this anymore, but what do you do? And we'll talk about that book later, but it goes into the historical part of the Manhattan Project, where they were designing these nuclear bombs, for the wars that were going on. And they would use some of these chemicals to make these bombs. And so it became a lot of factories were using these chemicals to do some really wild stuff for the US Army. Lots of people and cattle in these areas were getting sick from the fumes of these factory plants. And so, eyes started turning, heads were turning, and said, what is this? Is it bad for humans? Is it bad for our cattle and our land and, everything around? And so, there was a chief toxicologist named Dr. Harold Hodge. I kind of, he was a doctor. I respect that, but start digging deeper into some of the things that he did, and you realize, maybe there were some things that we probably should have known, but he was a big advocate for putting fluoride in our water system. And during that time, back in the 40s, it was like we really couldn't say fluoride was bad, because if we said it was bad, it was going to kind of halt the U.S. Army in making these nuclear bombs that, were kind of a big deal at that point, I guess. So it was approved, it was safe, they put it in the water, kind of, the public endorsed it at that point. So from then on, water was fluoridated, like in the municipal water systems, and then it just kind of became like a big thing that everybody was integrating it in the dental field. Things like Teflon cookware, some of that, you have fluoride in all kinds of sources now, that it just kind of became the standard. And if you, at that point, if you spoke out about it, it was kind of like quackery, it could ruin you, it could ruin your career. And so, really interesting, because now we're speaking out about it, and it's kind of like, it's funny how time is coming back to it, but in reality, it was like
full circle.
Yeah, it comes full circle. Yeah. And to me, it seemed more like a one size fits all strategy. Kind of parent that I am, I realize that, that doesn't work very well for everybody. So, but that was water fluoridation for a very long time. And there's been a lot of studies kind of going on since, because it's always been somewhat of a controversial thing. But because it was during that time and the Manhattan Project and building these bombs, it's like it was necessary for the government to be able to not scare people, and that it was a bad thing for us. So that's how it kind of integrated in our water system. So really crazy.
It is crazy, actually. What's interesting is that, like, I just wonder the conversations that happened behind closed doors that led to that decision of, oh, it seems like this is helpful for oral health, therefore let's put it in our water supply. Like there are rumors that that there were these extra chemicals from different industries, including the fertilizer industry, where they needed a way to dispose of those chemicals. Again, that's just rumor. I haven't really seen proof of that. But it makes you wonder what led to a substance being found as helpful to all of a sudden we're going to make sure that every person who drinks water is exposed to it.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I think you and I both have major problems with the ethics behind that. Because I was always taught, I assume that you were taught also, that we shouldn't medicate someone without their consent. And correct. I'm not exactly sure how you can consent if your municipal water system places something that's meant to be a therapeutic treatment for you in your water. Without knowing the risks and without knowing the true benefits of it.
Yeah, it's not informed consent for sure.
Definitely not informed consent. So I want to talk about a lawsuit, because there is a lawsuit that's going on in the news. And then we'll go into kind of the science behind, where does fluoride have a place? Where does it not have a place, in our opinion? And kind of where we go from there. But the lawsuit is something that is probably not going to be covered in great detail in the media. And so I want to make sure that our patients and our listeners are aware that it's going on, because it is important. So there is a group online called the Fluoride Action Network, and you can find them on fluoridealert.org, I believe is the name of the website. There are some other nonprofits as well: Moms Against Fluoridation, Food and Water Watch. And in 2016, They delivered a petition to the EPA to end the addition of fluoride into the drinking water because of fluoride's neurotoxicity. The EPA said, no, thanks. We're not going to do that. And so those nonprofits banded together and they sued the EPA. And this was back in 2017. And I don't know if you've ever been involved in the legal system or in a lawsuit. Hopefully you haven't, but things move very, very slowly. So if you add the legal system plus large government agencies being involved in the lawsuit, then you can imagine things will move even slower. And then in 2020, there was an event that distracted many of these government bodies. And so things moved even slower. So yes, this lawsuit was filed in 2017. In 2020, they had one, beginning part of a 7-day trial, different hearings that have happened, and that is ongoing. But what's important is that a lot of the evidence that's being used in this lawsuit is going to come from what's called the NTP report. And NTP is the National Toxicology Program. And the report was completed. And again, this is by cooperation from government agencies, so the Department of Health. The report was completed based on a 6-year systematic review, and was set to be released in May of 2022. And this report was basically a review of multiple studies that were looking at the neurotoxicity of fluoride. In that report, there were 72 studies that looked at IQ levels of children that were exposed to different levels of fluoride. And they found a positive correlation between fluoride levels in the drinking water and a loss of IQ score. So it was clearly a very, very interesting, to say the least, report. Interesting is maybe a nice word for it. It was an angering report. So the report was set to be released in May of 2022. That report was blocked from being made public by Health Secretary Rachel Levine. And then thankfully, a judge compelled them to release that report in March of 2023 based on the Fluoride Action Network's continued legal work and continued fight. So a lot has been going on in the background. These court dates happen very, very slowly. But basically, now the report is out, and the judge has said that things can continue to move forward. And another court date has been set for January of 2024. But in the meantime, the report is now public, and you can go online and see that NTP report, and we can look at exactly what's going on, exactly what was studied, and see that some of these research studies that were used in the systematic review. So sorry, I skipped around just a little bit. I'm looking at my notes. Erica, let's talk about where fluoride actually can be used, and then we'll go back to these studies some again.
So fluoride, for the most part, in the dental industry, is used obviously as a they have it in all kinds of forms, whether it's like a topical, a rinse, a toothpaste, in the drinking water, lots of different sources that are, it's pretty much included into for dental health. I grew up in the time where you walked into a dental office to get your dental cleaning, at the conclusion of every dental cleaning to hopefully, instigate good oral health and protection from the bad guys, the cavities. We would do fluoride treatments. As a child, I remember I would do everything from brushing a foam on my teeth, or, I'd put this really huge tray filled with gel, and you would have to sit there for like a minute in hopes that you don't gag or, swallow it all, but you had to sit there for at least a minute. And I think some of those even 3 minutes. Same goes for rinses. Some offices would use, fluoride rinses at the conclusion of a dental appointment. You can go into almost any grocery store in the dental aisle. There's toothpaste galore that just have fluoride all in them. And it's kind of overwhelming for a lot of people, because you walk in and you're like, which one do I get? They all have fluoride. So you assume it must be good for me, but not just that. I mean, there's so many different other places where we can be receiving fluoride and not really know about it. Once it was integrated into the water systems, that pretty much it taints the soil. You get in the soil, so then you get food sources and crops and produce that are actually grown with fluoride in it. It's just one of those things that it's hard to say, it comes from a multitude of different sources, but one of the biggest things is the water fluoridation. And so, water is kind of essential to humans. So we get it when we're taking a shower, we get it when we're drinking water from our home source, bathing, even just brushing your teeth at home with your water, you're getting a dose of fluoride at the same time there. And it's just that constant exposure that becomes a concern once you start reading a lot of the literature about, fluoride and its neurotoxicity. But, I guess we start talking about the chemistry of it and why it was kind of integrated into, the dental world, even after water fluoridation. We start looking at our, I'm going to get a little technical here, but our tooth enamel is about 96-97% hydroxyapatite, which is kind of a biocompatible. It's like calcium and phosphate, similar to bones. And so the idea was if you added fluoride to it, it would replace that hydroxy and become fluorapatite. Apparently that's a much more stronger than what your natural bone and teeth is. So it would make it much harder for karyogenic bacteria to actually penetrate the tooth surface. Thus, you get no cavities. Now we don't want to, everything in excess could be bad, so there's always those risks involved with too much of everything. But, we really take a look at too much fluoride. What can it do to you? And there's warnings on all the dental products that have fluoride in them that you shouldn't have too much. It could be lethal. It could be really bad. There's a lot of symptoms that come with too much fluoride, and some of those, we've kind of been conditioned to just go with, or we actually just don't point them to the fluoride itself. But, thinking point here, if fluoride was added to the water system, to help all of those who had risk for cavities, would they start doing the same thing if they were kind of trying to mitigate anxiety or depression or, uncontrolled blood sugars? What else would they put in the water system to kind of be a one size fits all treatment? Kind of scary if you think about things like that. But that's kind of how they started putting it in all of the pretty much everything in dental products. You even look down to some of the filling materials that are used whenever you're getting a filling done. Some of these materials are actually like fluoride releasing, so you have to be cautious about that too, because you get it in your toothpaste, you get it in your cleaning polish, you also get it in the material that's used for your composite fillings. And then you go home and you brush your teeth with fluoridated water and fluoridated toothpaste. It's like, there is so much exposure to fluoride these days. It's wild.
It's everywhere. Yeah.
It's everywhere. It's crazy. Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is that the powers that be decided that our teeth made of fluoride was better than the way God made our teeth with calcium.
Yes.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure I agree with that at all, but yeah. Quite frankly, that's apparently he didn't do it right.
He didn't do it right. He was insufficient, apparently.
Insufficient. Jeez. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Hard thing to believe sometimes.
So I know that our naturopaths that refer patients to us really are big believers in getting their patients off of fluoride. I know some of the reasons that they are so passionate about it and feel like it's so important that their patients are off of it are patients who have thyroid issues, because fluoride competes with iodine in the thyroid, so it can impact thyroid health. I've had some naturopaths say that it can calcify the pineal gland, which obviously that would be unfortunate. There are some osteoporosis, skeletal porosis, types of side effects that can happen when you're exposed to high levels over a certain period of time. And we don't exactly know what those high levels are, where it's just not well studied what's considered high and what's not considered high. And what are some other side effects that you're seeing or noticing of fluoride in general that we might not always hear about?
I mean, some of the, I've had patients tell me the first time, I mean, even myself, I felt like I always jumped around from toothpaste to toothpaste because it just, something weird would happen. It would be like ulcers. You'd break out in ulcers everywhere in your mouth, and you didn't really point it to the fluoride itself, but maybe it was another ingredient inside the toothpaste. But it was funny because I would jump from toothpaste to toothpaste, all of the big ones out there, and I could never find one that was just the right one,
Right.
But ulcers in the mouth, you can even dental fluorosis. I mean, that's a big one. Depending on where you grew up too, you tend to see patterns of different teeth that have that like a mottled appearance, and I mean that ties it right back to skeletal calcifications and stuff, because if it does that to your bones, it's going to do that to your teeth, and too much exposure as well. But some of the things,
West Texas water is what I always hear.
I know,
like, I grew up on West Texas water, so I've got the fluoride stains on my teeth.
Yeah, and I grew up in South Texas, Coastal Bend area, and it was the same thing. And just you would see that and think that that's just, you were the luck of the draw, you happened to either drink too much water or something was in the water that gave you that mottled appearance. In short term, I think one of the biggest things that kind of started making people kind of aware, I think it was 1974. There's a little boy that actually, I think he was 3. He, unfortunately died from ingesting like a way too much of a dental gel that had fluoride in it. And so it really got people thinking, like, this could be bad. Like, this is really bad. But so death is a big one. People will get like tremors, twitching. They'll kind of go into like convulsions and, a lot of just neuro things. So it makes you think, is it really, neurotoxic? All the dental products say you shouldn't swallow this, even the dental office treatments, it was very much, hold it in your mouth for 30 seconds or a minute and then spit out. You never want to just swallow it. And you're like, but it's in my mouth. So like, I won't swallow it, I promise.
Yeah. How could one even measure how much you're going to swallow when you spit out most of it? It's mixed with saliva. Like, you can't not swallow some of it.
And some of those are higher concentrations because they're the fluoride treatment, and so you're like, I mean, me too. I'm back in the day and have like fluoride varnishes applied to my teeth, and it's like, I didn't I guess I wasn't thinking at that point, but I would always be that patient that like get this massive headache like right after. And I think it would make my salivary glands like just kind of profuse. Just it was the strangest thing. And, never once tied it back to the fluoride, but it was like every time I had a fluoride treatment, I just felt awful afterwards. And it's like,
Yeah,
well, we condition ourselves to kind of think this is how it is, this is what you do, and keep
yep,
moving,
that's right.
don't
That's
ask
right.
questions.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Don't ask
Yeah, don't ask
questions.
questions. Yeah, until
What's
you do.
interesting is when I, towards the end of dental school, I can remember, or no, maybe it was soon after dental school, because it was a continuing education class that I was taking. And it was an education class on the infant oral exams, that it's
That's right.
specifically the D0145 code,
Yep.
the infant oral exams, specifically in a Medicaid setting, which is
Yep.
where I worked for a couple of years after graduation. And they specifically wanted us to paint fluoride varnish on gum tissue,
Gum tissue.
on gum
Or, yeah.
tissue, on these babies
Yeah.
with no teeth.
Yep.
And so I can remember even then, this is before I was crunchy. Even then I asked, well, how do you keep them from swallowing it? Why do they need fluoride varnish on their gum tissue?
Yeah.
And the reasoning was they actually expected the babies and toddlers to swallow it, so that the teeth, as they were erupting, would have fluoride incorporated and be stronger as they erupt.
Yep. Yeah.
So basically what they're saying when they do that is they feel like you're too stupid to brush your kids' teeth and keep sugar from sitting on your kids' teeth. So we have to make your baby ingest this stuff so that it's already incorporated when they get teeth from the very beginning.
That's what it sounds like to me.
I don't like when people insult me.
Yeah.
And that seems insulting.
It does. It does. And I mean, I was a new mom at one point too, and there's things that you just don't know. And,
Exactly.
you look up at some of these medical professionals and you're like, I want, the health and the safety and the happiness of my children. And if you say this is for them and it's good, then, we ultimately all want great for our children,
Of course.
But, some of the people that don't question this, they take the advice of some of these professionals who are taught this, and they give it to their children. And it's the way I felt with fluoride varnishes. I often wonder, what do these babies feel, after a fluoride treatment, and I think that was one of the big things when I became a mother. And it was like, does my daughter really need this, and
Oh, that's such a good question that I hadn't even thought of until you just said that. Like, of course, you tend to be more sensitive, like some of our sensitive patients. You tend to be more sensitive to different chemical exposures. One of these canaries in the coal mine kind of people. So yeah, of course, what do these babies experience? They're not getting a high enough of a dose that it's causing, immediate, urgent clinical side effects. But what are they experiencing? Are they getting the same headaches that you would get when you were bigger and were getting fluoride treatments in the office?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, the hygienist heart in me is like, I always want to do what's right. And I want my patients to understand the value of, the things that I recommend. But, there came a point where I was like, I don't think they need it. So, I don't want to give them something they don't need.
Yeah.
So I couldn't, that's where the ethics came in. And it was like, I'm not going to give them something that they don't need. And I'm not going to push them to it, because if they don't need it, then why am I going to just make them part of the standard and give it to them,
Yeah.
Um,
So what was that? I'm curious, what was that timeline like for you? Because I know this was long before your Flourish days. how did you stop poisoning your patients? That's what I want to ask.
Yeah, I know.
We're gonna get kicked off YouTube anyway. It's fine.
Hey, I'm all for it. So, went to dental hygiene school. And actually a little bit of history, my senior project was developing a community fluoride program. And
So you were in deep.
I was in deep, man. I was like that probably teacher's pet, I wanted to do good. I was first generation college student, and I was like, I'm gonna do good.
Yeah.
I studied it, and they teach it. It's like a vitamin, it's a nutrient, everybody needs it. And I took off running with it. Um, I'm not sure if this fluoride program is still going on here in the DFW area, but I know it was for a few years after I graduated, even about the time that I actually started going down my rabbit holes. And then I became a mom, and that's when I was like, oh, I don't think I need that, But yeah, pretty much my daughter is almost 7. And as soon as she was born, this was about the same time that the Fluoride Action Network had just kind of handed the petition to the EPA. And, she was just weeks old, and it was kind of like, dang, maybe that was the seed that planted it, because I was like, you start thinking about things. And I think I followed it for a little bit, somewhere in the woes of new motherhood, when she got her first teeth, it was like, do the thing. You're supposed to brush, and you can use like a tiny little pea size amount of fluoridated toothpaste, and brush those teeth. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that either. Water's just fine. At that time it was tap water. So, I mean, she was still getting that kind of fluoride, but, that was about when I started to really, I worked in corporate dentistry at the time too. And you got to make your fluoride quota, and I wasn't good at it because I couldn't tell people to do it. It just wasn't something that I felt wholeheartedly confident in, especially if I knew my patients and knew their diet, knew their lifestyle, knew their home care regimens that they did. Like, if they hadn't had cavities in, 4 or 5 years, it was like, are they really at a heightened risk,
Right.
So you start finding your people that are like, yeah, she's not going to make me do the fluoride, the extra $50 I have to pay at checkout, and that's kind of where I went. I actually didn't even know biological dentistry was a thing. Like, it was, you just start finding your hippie patients, and they start following you wherever you go. And I left corporate dentistry, kind of went on different ventures, and another friend of mine was trying to start up. I think we both learned a lot about biological dentistry and that it was an actual thing, and jumped right in, and I don't think I ever turned back. Like, it was like, the more I knew, the more I was like, I'm definitely not going to poison my child,
Yeah.
It was crazy, but
So that's good. So you kind of like I did, like you kind of incorporated slowly enough that you didn't face a point where you were getting in trouble from your manager or your doctor for not doing fluoride, right?
No, I mean, I think that kind of conversation was back in my corporate days. They're like, you would make your production quota if you would get a couple more fluoride treatments in
Just
there.
do fluoride. Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
I'll try, but not really. It's like, you stand behind your fingers behind your back going like, nah, okay.
Yeah.
I think when it affected your pay, that's when you're like, this is not right. I'm not going to push something that they don't need so I can get paid for it.
Right.
But yeah, and life was a lot easier professionally as a dental hygienist when you just had to take fluoride out of it, because it's always that conversation at the end, like, okay, let's do your fluoride treatment, and patients are like, do I have to pay for it? Does my insurance cover it? And nobody wanted to pay for it, even if it was needed. So it just made life so much
I had forgotten about those uncomfortable conversations.
Right. And it's a beautiful thing to just let it go, and I don't have anybody these days, like in the last 6 years, I haven't really had anybody complain about me not pestering fluoride on them. And it's a great thing to cut it. And it's really hard for a lot of hygienists because, those are the standards in dental hygiene school, they weigh that, So to get out in the real world and start seeing your patients and you want to do good for them, you're like, what if I don't do fluoride on them? Like, are they gonna get cavities and it's gonna be my fault, Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of couldn't do it. I didn't think they needed it. And I didn't want to force something on them because they have to consent to it and they have to be, confident in their decision. And
Right.
if I wasn't confident in it, I felt like I was lying, and I'm not going to lie to my patients. Like, that's not, like, I can't do it. I'm not a good person if I lie, and I wouldn't do that to my patients. So
what would you say? You probably have nicer, more real world advice than I would. What would you say to your dental hygiene colleagues who are in quote unquote normal dentistry, but who are questioning their own use of fluoride on their patients? What advice would you have for them if they don't feel comfortable doing that fluoride varnish after every cleaning?
For me, and I mean, I'm very transparent with my patients because everybody's on this journey. Everybody wants to do good for themselves or their children. Everybody's on this journey. And heck, I was there too at one point. So, I say question everything. I always tell my patients, if I want you to understand why I'm recommending this, like, I would never tell them, like, you have to do it today. Oftentimes I tell them, read up on it. I give them my number, my email, and I tell them, if you have questions, let me know. We'll follow up on it at your next appointment. And most of them will go and read it. And then they're like, well, I didn't know that, and it made them fully aware of why I wasn't going to do it. And I tell some of the other hygienists and people that I've, ran into, the more you know, the more you do, and vice versa, because you start to not do a lot of things because you learn more about it. And so, do your research. We're all on this journey. Give yourself some grace. I mean, if you were taught the way you and I were, I mean, we all did it at one point. And it's kind of like that waking up moment where you're like, well, do we have to do that? And we don't have to if there's other ways out there to get the job done without, falling back on fluoride. It's not the end all be all.
Exactly. And that's a perfect segue. So I always say I have much stronger ethical and even scientifically, I have much stronger opinions against fluoride in our water supply than I do fluoride in our toothpaste. But I don't want any fluoride in my office because, the topical use of fluoride, I don't think is as dangerous, as nefarious as taking it in systemically, continuously over long periods of time. And the topical use of fluoride is shown to be more effective at preventing cavities than the systemic ingestion of fluoride. But with that being said, having fluoride present everywhere in ways and in dosages that we can't measure, it now has become a very strong value and principle of mine clinically that we don't have it or use it in our office. So even topically, because we can't control the dose in other places, I'm not going to add to that dose in my office. So we don't have fluoride in the office. We don't use it. We don't promote it.
None of it, not even in our water.
Not even in our water. It's filtered out before it gets past the back wall of the office is where that filtration is. So that being said, what do we do to prevent cavities? Because you're right, it's not a nutrient. We don't need fluoride. So when patients ask, what do we do then to help prevent cavities? Then what do you typically say to them?
I tell them we are not a fluoride deficient society. We are a nutrient deficient society. I think that comes from Dr. Stephen Lin, but that really hits the nail on it. there's a whole lot of reasons why cavities do happen. I mean, the key to holistic dentistry really is finding the root cause. And more often people are on, or at least my patients, they're on a journey where they're trying to improve their lifestyle and they're trying to change up and lower their toxic load in, in their life. So I have conversations with them where I start asking about their diet, their sleep, what kind of water source they have. And I really dig deep into a lot of that. I mean, it's a little cliche, but I tell them, we need you to eat well, sleep well, breathe well, and live well, all of those things. When we start digging deep into some of those, we change up diet, we change up their water source, and we give them the nutrients that they do need, the real nutrients that they need. We give those to them, and we can make a shift in that microbiome to help them not get any more cavities. And thus, sometimes they do have to be restored. They're at a point where we have to restore them, and that's okay. But I ultimately don't want them going down that path of always had reoccurring cavities. So my goal is change a lot of those things that are the actual causes of the cavities before, falling back on something that, as toxic as fluoride is, it's not working. If it worked, and with so many sources of it these days, why do people still have cavities?
Exactly.
If it's effective, why do we have to give the bad news in the dental office that somebody has cavities and we have to fix them? So I really dig deeper, and I tell them, it's not a nutrient, but we got to get you to a point where you are receiving the nutrients you need well enough to be able to sustain, caries prevention, going forward, having like that healthy, oral microbiome that's going to support, years of not having to have dental work. I mean, there's so many things we can do these days now. Diet and nutrition is like a big talk on my end. I really spend as much time as I can with my patients on that because, raised in the 80s and 90s, like you start looking at the things you ate as a kid and you're like, I don't know how I'm still alive, but we were all there at some point. And so, I think a lot of our patients are kind of on the same realm where they're thinking like, I want better for my children. I'm like, yeah, you and me both, and it's like changing the things that we did for our children so that way they don't live the same way that we are as adults,
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's kind of how I end up.
Oh, I think you're 100% correct. You've got to get to the cause. You've got to get to the very, very basics, just like any other area of health, just like when you're preventing any other chronic illness, you have to get to the root. Are we eating well? Are we getting nutrients? Are we absorbing the nutrients that we're getting?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can solve that, then a lot of other things just fall into place.
Yeah.
But we still, even then, I get it. People still need a bit of an easy button. Like you need something because changing your diet and seeing those results takes time. It takes sometimes a year or more. So in the meantime, we still have products that are safer than fluoride that can be helpful at topically preventing and reversing tooth decay. So we can do those remineralizing toothpaste that instead of creating fluoroapatite crystals in the enamel, let's add some calcium hydroxyapatite, the substance that our enamel is actually made out of. And if we found if we get the particle small enough, it will actually absorb into the tooth and help remineralize the tooth.
It's kind of like the law of similars, like when something's weak, you give it what it is to help it, if your enamel is weak, give it the hydroxyapatite. And that's a big one these days. And there's a lot of toothpaste out there that are kind of going that realm too, a lot of hydroxyapatite toothpaste out there. And a lot of our patients, when they make the switch, which is amazing to me because some of them come in with sensitivity. Some of them come in with just, I'm always the cavity person. I always have cavities no matter what I do. We put them on a hydroxyapatite toothpaste and they come back and they're not experiencing the sensitivity they've had for years, you know. It's just amazing. There's different products that have the hydroxyapatite, from toothpaste to tooth putties to tooth powders, all kinds of things. And I think integrating those, we've done some, you know, chairside ozone treatments just to be, you know, just balancing that microbiome at the same time, you know, and patients think that's amazing. And it's oxygen too. So we're not incorporating anything else.
Right.
You know, crazy stuff, you know. There's
And
a lot more ways to do it. And I think that's why people are afraid to let go of fluoride, even professionals, because they're like, we just don't know what else to do, you know.
I know that's what doesn't make sense to me is they're like, oh, well, then what do you do?
Yeah, like, well,
oh, well, there's like a whole world of things that
that we can
are
do.
scientifically proven to do well and to help prevent tooth decay. I love some of the studies behind xylitol are really good, solid studies. Some of them are showing that it can be as effective statistically, if not more effective than fluoride at reducing the number of cavities that you have if you get certain exposures to xylitol. And xylitol is just a plant-based sweetener. We could do a whole other podcast episode, and probably will, on xylitol. Because we want to make sure that we source it correctly. There are pros and cons to xylitol, but again, if I had my choice between which is safer, xylitol or fluoride, then I'm going to choose xylitol 100% of the time.
Yeah, I agree. That's something else that we usually talk about in exposures to xylitol too. And patients are like, where do I get this stuff? And so we go down the rabbit hole of trying to find, you know, different sources for them to integrate, you know, more than 1 or 2 exposures of xylitol per day, a good sourced xylitol, so we can change, you know, their dental history from here on out.
Yeah. So, I love those rabbit holes. Those are fun rabbit holes to send people on.
You know, this kind of dentistry really is fun. Like I'm not sure I can work in a regular dental office anymore. Like, I just can't do it. I just can't do it. It's not going to work.
Well, no, especially if they would ask you to poison your patients every day.
Yeah, I'm going in and say, I don't poison my patients. So if that's going to be a problem, then have a good day.
Oh, I love it.
Crazy.
Okay. Well, let's see. We've talked about a lot of the side effects of fluoride, you know, why we don't love it, especially in the water supply. We can't control the dose. We can't give consent. There are a ton of effects we just don't know. There was another, I was doing some research, looking up some of the articles, and it just happened completely by chance. I just happened to come across the American Cancer Society. I was actually looking up the different water levels, and because, you know, I asked you yesterday, when did they change their guidance? Because they used to say the ideal amount of fluoride in water was 1 part per million, or 1 is it milligram per liter, I think is the units,
you know,
that they use.
That dosage right there, that threshold, was established back in the 40s by Dr. Harold Hodge, you know, and that's how long ago that was.
Might need to be updated. Well, they updated it in 2015.
Oh man.
And in 2015, they said because fluoride is now so prevalent in our environment, because it's been in the water for so long, they have reduced that ideal to 0.7 parts per million. And where I saw that, and hopefully you can still see me because I don't want to share my screen and make you see the article, but I just want to read. It's on the American Cancer Society's website, and it's a page all about fluoride.
Oh, wow. That's
And
crazy.
the way that they word it is so fascinating to me. It says, several studies looking at a possible link between water fluoridation and cancer have been published in recent years. A partial report of a study from the Harvard School of Public Health, published in 2006, found that exposure to higher levels of fluoride in drinking water was linked to a higher risk of osteosarcoma in boys, but not girls. And that's true. The second part of the Harvard study, published in 2011, compared the fluoride levels in bones near tumors in people with osteosarcoma to the levels in people with other types of bone tumors. And then
side effect.
blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it goes through what they found. And their summary was, these studies have not found an increased risk of osteosarcoma in areas of water fluoridation. And then there's another one here where the wording is interesting. Oh, here's a good little quip. They concluded overall, no clear association between water fluoridation and incidence or mortality of bone cancers were found. However, given the level of interest surrounding the issue of public water fluoridation, it is surprising to find that little high quality research has been undertaken. So basically it's a very PC article from the American Cancer Society. Basically, they're saying, we don't know. It hasn't been studied well. No good quality data says that there is a clear link between water fluoridation and increased cancers. That
doesn't mean we still need to use it, right?
Well, why should the burden of proof be on researchers to find that it's dangerous and that there is a clear link to cancer? Why shouldn't the burden of proof be on whoever is putting the effing medicine in the water to prove that it's safe first? Like, it seems like things are going backwards. Things are in reverse here.
Yeah.
That instead of showing that it's safe, they are waiting and waiting and waiting. They're going to keep exposing the public to it until somebody proves that it's dangerous.
Oh, we have to wait for that. Wait for a tragedy to happen before we do.
What's the tragedy that's going to happen? It's already happening.
It's already happening. You're like,
the tragedy is we've been exposed to this crap for decades. Now it's generational. And we can't, just like every other chemical that we're exposed to, just like Roundup and GMOs and all the thing, like you can't link it to a specific thing. It's
everywhere.
Just this cumulative effect of it being everywhere all the time and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
so
that's one thing that we do, or at least I try to help my patients with too. We're just trying to clean up our lives, take out as much of all of these chemicals, all of these just things that we don't need, because they're everywhere,
Yes.
That was the same thing with my daughter. I didn't want to integrate so much in her, precious little baby. And I thought, why we do this with a lot of our children these days too. And I mean, that's kind of how they instruct us to do, with antibiotics and all kinds of, when they get sick, you start integrating all these things and you're like, it's because it's what's been done and it's what we do. And you're like, oh, can't we just live life simply,
Right. You would think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to go back for just a second, because right as I was talking about the NTP report, the dog came in and there was a vacuum cleaner in the background and all these things were going on in the background. I don't know if you could hear them or not. But it was chaos in my head for just a second, but it was at a very important part. So I want to go back for just a little bit and talk about this NTP report, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. I know you had 4 studies that you wanted to highlight real quickly too. So, like I was saying earlier in the podcast, the NTP report is a huge part of the lawsuit that the Fluoride Action Network has against the EPA. And new trial date is going to be in January of 2024. So those things will be coming out. Just recently, like just a couple of weeks ago, a federal judge compelled the EPA to go ahead and release this NTP report that had been held back by the Health Secretary, Rachel Levine. So the report was held back for 10 months after it was supposed to be released. And then finally they gave in and released the report. So in that report, the reason that this report, I think, was probably pushed aside and there was no good motivation for any kind of government agency to release this report. And I understand also any kind of report that's going to rock the boat and challenge the things that have been considered the norm for many, many years. They want to make sure that their I's are dotted, their T's are crossed. I can appreciate that. And so now the report is out, and what it is, it's like a study of studies. It is a systematic review. It took them 6 years, and it went through multiple rounds of peer review, which they went above and beyond to check and double check the validity of the review itself and to go into depth on the validity of the studies that they were using. So this study of studies in the NTP report, what they found is that as of 2020, there were 72 studies that compared levels of fluoride in the drinking water and the IQ of the children in those communities. And in 69 of those 72 studies, they found a correlation between the two. Basically, higher levels of fluoride led to lower levels of IQ. So that is a big deal. And by lower levels of IQ, we mean anywhere from 5 to 10 points on the IQ scale. And that might not seem like a lot, but if a child is borderline special needs, then you've just taken everybody at the edge of that level and now have created people whose lives are drastically affected. A child who might have been a normally functioning child in society, who is now considered special needs and will need extra help. So a big deal, something that back in the old days was like, that was complete rumor, tinfoil hat stuff, all the crazy conspiracy theory people were the only ones who were trying to say that fluoride dumbs down the population. Well, holy crap, we've got studies now that fluoride is dumbing down the population.
It's not quackery.
It's not quackery.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really big deal, and it's really upsetting. It's really upsetting because the quackery stuff that was perpetuated was what was taught to me in dental school.
Yeah.
So among these, okay, perfect. Yes, those were the important points that I wanted to get to. That was the important stuff that the dog interrupted that I didn't want the dog to interrupt. Okay. Now, for those studies that you looked up that I would love for you to highlight, if you would.
Sure. Yeah. So Paul Connett, he's the director of the Fluoride Action Network. One thing he said was, you just have to read 4 of these studies that were in this systematic review, and deliberately adding fluoride to drinking water unnecessarily endangers children's brain. That's just 4 of however, what was it, 72 studies, just 4 of them, and you're already into it. And you're like, so we look at 4 of these studies, which were also, I think 3 out of these 4 were already, they were sponsored by the National Institute of Health. So let that tell you something. Yeah, the first study, or the first big one, it came out in 2017 in the Journal of Environmental Health Perspectives. They found a link between fluoride in the urine of pregnant women and lower measures of intelligence of their offspring, which I thought was fascinating. So for women who are pregnant and still using fluoridated products and drinking fluoridated water, you're kind of, you're at risk. Your child's intelligence is very much at risk in utero. The second study, it was the association between maternal fluoride exposure during pregnancy and IQ scores. So obviously, the more maternal exposure during pregnancy meant the IQ scores were much lower in the offspring. And that one came out just right after 2017. I think it was a 2019 study that was published in the Journal of American Medical Association Pediatrics. And when it comes to kids, that's what gets heads turning. It really does. 2019, there was another study, the association of water fluoride and urinary fluoride concentrations with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which, that's a big topic, right? We start looking at ADD, ADHD, and I feel like our current system often wants to medicate for these things instead of digging deeper into what caused them and how to not, continue this kind of thing for all of the children. But they found basically that higher levels or exposure to higher levels of fluoride in tap water, it's associated with an increased risk of ADHD symptoms. Wild, get your kid
That's
off fluoride.
insane. Yeah.
So, and particularly among adolescents too. That was one thing that they kind of zoned in on that study. But an adolescence would still be my baby, and so if it's going to pose those kind of symptoms in somebody that old, it's almost that cumulative exposure that we were talking about, it just builds up till it tips over, and I wouldn't do it for any baby, and then all the way in 2020, there was another study. It found a large decrease in the IQ of children who had been fed formula using fluoridated water, which, I can't say I didn't buy it. I didn't formula feed my baby for the most part. It was kind of a really, really new thing for me at that time. But anybody who has formula fed, you can go to any store and they sell these gallons of water that are supposed to be purified water to specifically use to mix, powdered formulas. And these gallons of water say fluoride added, and so
nursery water is what it was called.
Yeah, that's what it was called. Yeah, I couldn't remember the name of it. Nursery water. So basically, there was a big decrease in the IQ of infants who were formula fed with fluoridated water. And I just, whether they were on the tap water, you might as well, use tap water to make your formula. It's still fluoride exposure, but I'm like, wow, 4 studies in and you're already just kind of shook by how much it really messes with the brains of our children from infancy all the way up, and
all the way
and that's just so scary. Like, we don't need this. Our kids don't need this. Nobody does.
So I want every pregnant or new mom to think about that for just a minute. So if they say that the ideal dose, it used to be 1 part per million, now it's 0.7 part per million. If they say that is the ideal amount of fluoride to put in the water system, who is that for? Who is that 0.7 safe for? Is it safe for you drinking 8-ounce glasses of water a day? Maybe it is. What if it's for your baby that weighs 6 pounds at birth and you're not able to breastfeed, and the options that you're given are formula that you mix with water, then what dose is your baby getting? What will your baby's fluoride levels be like after drinking 100% bottle-fed formula made with water from 0.7 parts per million of fluoride?
Yeah, it's a hard thought. Hard thought.
And that's what they're telling us is okay. So what's really basically what I would consider the damning conclusion of the NTP report is that these peer-reviewed scientists who were commenting on the results of their study were saying that they could not give a safe level of fluoride that could be added to our municipal water supplies. There is no safe level, is what they determined. Now, that doesn't mean let's take a step back. And this is very PC. Everybody knows that there are serious implications to what they're saying. So they're not saying that at 0.5 you're safe, and then all of a sudden at 0.6 you're dangerous, or at 2.0, maybe it's double. They're not saying that all of a sudden you get to 2 parts per million and now you're going to see health effects. They're saying that the correlations that they found really tracked along pretty equally. And so there's no drop off in basically symptoms or ill effects. So they can't determine where that safe spot is. We don't know. We don't know what the safe spot is, and we can't control how much we're getting. So
why are we doing it?
Why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? Okay, fabulous. So resources for patients, because I know we'll need to clean up. We do need to clean up. I need to clean up at my house, but we need to wrap up here fairly soon.
Yeah.
So resources for patients, for listeners, is I would highly encourage you, if you have not already, to visit fluoridealert.org. That is the Fluoride Action Network's website. And that is, I think, a really nice, easy source where they have a ton of educational materials on fluoride that are really easy to see.
Yeah, they're also really good about updating everything on the lawsuit right now. And so you can, point blank, you can follow everything that is going on with this lawsuit. And so I think the next hearing is in July, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. And they post pretty quickly, updates on it. So to follow along, that's a good one. Yeah.
They do, for sure. But then I also, I want you to make informed decisions about this. This is one of those things that you really shouldn't let other people make these decisions for you. So I want you to go to the American Dental Association. I want you to go to their website and look up what they have to say about fluoride also, because yes, they will cite a ton of studies. They'll cite reasonings for why they feel that fluoride is so beneficial, and even why they think it's beneficial to have in the water supply. And I want you to look at those and compare it to what you see on a place that has the counter arguments like Fluoride Action Network. Compare those two and make those decisions for yourself, because yes, they will cite science. I want you to look at how recent those studies are, and what's actually said in those studies before you make your decision. But absolutely, I want you to see both sides. And then Erica, you had a lot of some other good resources too. Where else can listeners go to get more information?
There's so many resources out there nowadays too. Some of my favorites, videos, books, websites, a lot of them are out there. One of my favorite things that I think a lot of people should watch is Dr. David Kennedy's Fluoride Gate. It's like a full documentary on water fluoridation. It's good. Just Google Dr. David Kennedy, Fluoride Gate. Some of the other organizations that were involved with the initial petition for the lawsuit that's going on right now, foodandwaterwatch.org. That's a good nonprofit. Moms Against Fluoridation. I mean, everybody knows when moms team up, I mean, so much more is conquered. I mean, we just rock the show, you know.
You bet.
One of my favorite things, and honestly, this is one of the things I often recommend for a lot of my patients. It's one of my favorite books. I remember when I read it, I was a combination of mad, sad, and pissed off, you know. I didn't know how I felt, but it was definitely one of the things that caught me and was like, enough is enough. It's actually a book called The Fluoride Deception. I have it here. By a investigative reporter, Christopher Bryson. This is an amazing book, and this goes back and talks way into the 1900s about how fluoride was even where it started, you know, how it got into our water system. So much in there. I mean, there's even he uncovered like some legit things, like documents, photographs from early 1900s about fluoride. It's kind of creepy, actually, but every time I've recommended this book for patients, they come back and they're fully informed. They had enough to make them confident, and they're like ready to go on, find the root cause and figure out what to do for their oral health. And it's
Absolutely.
So that's another one. I think International Academy of Oral Medicine Toxicology, I'm very grateful for them too, just in my journey of biological dentistry. You know, they have a lot of doctors in there that have kind of gone through that quackery, you know, and they were kind of shunned upon and ostracized a little bit, you know. And if you read a lot of the studies, Dr. David Kennedy is a part of that too. If you read a lot of their reports and things, you're almost like, there's a whole nother side to this that some dental professionals don't even know. And so I encourage dental professionals who may have that slight thought of, well, what else do you do aside from fluoride? You know, I want them to know about fluoride, and they can go to the IAOMT and learn about it. You know, we're all in this together. You know, they can learn about it, and we'll say they can come over to the dark side with us.
That's right. That's right. I love it. I love it. Okay. And you had a fabulous idea that I am going to take you up on. You thought that it would be a good idea to give away a copy of the book, The Fluoride Deception, that you want all of our patients to read. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a giveaway, and it's going to be cool. So if you choose whatever platform is your favorite, it does not matter. If you write us a review on Spotify or your iTunes podcasts, write us a review, screenshot it. If you're on YouTube or Rumble, if you subscribe or comment, write us I don't think they do reviews on there, but you can like and subscribe on those. If you screenshot that, just DM me on any of our social media channels that your review, your subscription, any of those. And the first 5 of you who DM that screenshot to me, I will send a copy of The Fluoride Deception. So first 5. So,
got it.
And we're so appreciative. Anytime you like or subscribe to one of our channels. Like I said, hopefully we don't get kicked off of YouTube too terribly soon. But if we do it's okay. It's all right. If you review us on one of the podcast platforms, we are so grateful. Erica, thank you so much for taking the time, for hanging through some technical glitches today. so that we could give our listeners and our patients this super important information. Because really, we want you guys to be informed. This is so important for you to be able to make your own decisions for your health and the health of your family. So, Erica, I'm thankful for you, listeners and viewers, thankful for all of you, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye, guys.